Now proceeding with the next topic of study is related to database. But before going to the database, let's understand what are the various types of data. As we saw that the data can include numbers, images, audios, videos and so on. But how this data is understood and what are the variants of data which we can see. So when I talk upon types of data, initially they divide data or bifurcate data into three major types. Now what are those? As you can see on the screen, the very first is structured, the second is unstructured, and the third form of data is nothing but semi-structured. Now let's try to understand each one of them in detail. Now when it comes to something called as structured data. Now what is the meaning of structured? Whenever a term known as structured comes into consideration, the meaning of structured means organized, which means the data forms a proper structure. Now what is the meaning of a proper structure? Which means it will be well organized, it will be well formulated in such a way that it gives a good readability of data. Now what kind of data do you think so are well organized in nature? So the data which are divided into rows and columns are known as a well organized data. So let's try to note down points for a structured data. Whenever the word known as structured comes, so one thing which you should always focus is an organized data. Or you can also call it a well organized data. Now what is the meaning of an organized data and a well organized data? That is, the data is well formulated, the data is in proper structure, and whenever structured data come, organization comes hand in hand. Now, structured data is an organized data, well organized data, and this data is particularly in the form of tabular. That is, the data is being stored in form of rows and columns. Now, as you have seen, when we store data in the form of tables, we obviously have something called as rows, we have something called as columns. So, when you're storing a structured data, the data will follow a particular structure of storing it into rows and columns. So, accessing the data, understanding the data, and the representation of the data is cleaner, understandable, as well as interpretable. So, whenever this form of data, that is the data is stored in the form of rows and columns, it is known as a traditional way of storing the data. Now, why it is called as a traditional way of storing the data? Way of storing data. Now, why do you think so it's called as a traditional way of storing the data? Is traditionally, when the data storage came into consideration, they thought, why not to store data in the form of tables? And that's when they started storing the data in the form of rows and columns. So whenever a data is stored in the form of rows and columns, it's known as a structured data. So whichever type of data is in the form of table, that is known as a structured form of data. But not all data could be bifurcated in the form of tabular format. Yes. So I cannot say all the natures of data or all the types of data such as images, audios, videos are structured in nature. No, the only nature which is following, the only type of data which is following a structured nature is nothing but a tabular data. So if I now go and understand something called as unstructured data, let's say here it is written something called as unstructured. Now, you know what is structured. Structure means well organized or organized, correct? But what is the meaning of unstructured? Now, when the word un comes, which means it's not well organized, which means the data is not organized in a particular structure, in a particular format. It's not formulated in the form of rows and columns. So, a data which is apart from a tabular format, that is not stored in the form of tables, is known as what? An unstructured data, which is the data is not in tabular format, which could not be able to store itself in the form of table. And that's when you store it in the unstructured form of data. So you can see images, you can see audios, you can see videos. Now images, audios and videos, you cannot bifurcate them in the form of rows and columns. And that's when this type of data could not be divided or could not be stored in the rows and columns format, and that's when they are not in structured format. They are not following a specific pattern of storage, and they are known as unstructured data. So, why unstructured data came into consideration? As you know, internet, the most powerful thing in the recent times, is explored to a great extent. As the internet exploration began, the natures of data or the variety of data started increasing. We were able to get videos, we were able to get audios, we were able to get text documents. We are also being able to find data in the form of graphs, charts, and many things as such. So there was not only a traditional way of data being organized or the traditional way of data being stored. Now the data has also variants which are apart from rows and columns, and that's when they are being stored in a format of unstructured. So the modern databases which are there in the recent times, modern data which is there due to the internet exploration is in the form of unstructured format. So I hope we are clear upon what is structured and what is unstructured. Now, what is the difference between semi-structured, or what is the semi-structured nature of data? Now, as the name suggests, structured, as you know, the meaning of structured means organized, well organized, that is in the form of rows and columns, but it's semi. Now, what is the meaning of semi? Semi means it's not complete. It's a portion of data or half of the data or some fraction of data into a well organized manner. So semi is not complete. So it can be half or it can be portion of data. Which is what? Which is structured in nature. And rest of them, it's in unstructured. Which means that the data is not following complete rows and columns format. There is some nature of data which is unstructured as well in it. So what kind of data are used into a semi-structured data? As you have seen, XML files. Now XML file stores data in the form of text as well as a tabular nature. You have also seen websites. As you go in any Wikipedia page, let's say I go and see FIFA football. So I can find lots of text information, intro, history, and so on. And after that, there will be somewhere in between tabular data is being stored. So here, the nature of data in my entire documents or the text which is there, it's in the form of two ways. The text which is written is a unstructured data. The table which is stored is a structured format. So it's not completely structured, it's not completely unstructured, and it's known as a semi-structured data. Now, many a times it's considered a part of an unstructured data, but this is the nature of data which we have. So that is an unstructured data. As you can see in the images which we have bought, in the structured data, as you can see, the data is well organized, the data is well formulated. Now in the unstructured, the data is not in a particular pattern, it's not in a particular format because it's not being stored in a particular form. And then you can see in semi-structured, so half it is structured and half seems to be distorted, that's unstructured. So these are the various types of data in which the data are understood. It could be structured, it could be semi-structured, it could be unstructured as well. So I hope we are able to understand what are the various types of data which are being stored.